the only two things they told me about him was that he had a job for a few weeks.
Technical job?
Yes, a really technical job. And then he likes to play with some network devices. I don't know. He'll tell you about it. Take it over. I'm sorry.
All right, so this is addition by subtraction, how network devices affect your security. I'm Chris, and this is the basic premise of this talk. It's not super technical. It's middle of the road. We'll talk about some stuff. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them, or raise your hand, whichever you prefer. Bottom line is stuff you're adding, stuff you're spending money on and adding to your network is actually adding low-hanging fruit for attackers to go after. Real quick, I used to be in the Army, security researcher. I've talked at a couple of conferences. I love PowerShell, and I contribute to the PowerSploit project. I don't speak for anybody, not my company, not any company I used to work for, anyone. All of this stuff I did in my free time, as I'll explain. So who are you guys? By a show of hands, do we have any managers in here? A couple? How about network or system administrators? Awesome. Any auditors? Pen testers? How about any vendors that sell network appliances? Good. Any students?
Yeah.
What about awkward huggers?
What's that? And one awkward hugger. All right. So I'm going to tell a story. I do that from time to time. This was the first network device. I was taught. I went through traditional pen test classes and I learned how to be a pen tester, but I had this engagement where we were going to the same company in different places. So each one of their networks kind of looked the same. So the first time I found this MRV, which is basically on the back, it looks like a switch, but each port connects to the console of all the network infrastructure. So they did a really smart thing. They said, Telnet, SSH, these things are bad. So we're going to put it all in one device. And so this is a security device that they put it into their rack, and they would SSH into this, and it would give them console access through a little menu to every single thing on their infrastructure. They could centrally manage it from one location, which is awesome. The problem was, so the blue is them, what they were doing. The red is what we ended up doing, or I ended up doing with this, is that we found a vulnerability in it. I bought it off of eBay. I looked for it because I knew that was the only thing that we could get into, that we could see externally. So I bought one off of eBay and I started looking at it. I found an account that wasn't documented that could be used to authenticate, and then I found a way around the basic controls to be able to actually get root access on the Linux OS that it's running over. And then I created an outbound shell, and then I did everything from this device. And since it had console access, physical access to all of their infrastructure, we could pop holes in the firewall, change their router configs, and we had all their credentials because it was built hard-coded into this device. So I was like, this is really powerful, and I can continue to use this. And this stuff's still out there. That was 4 or 5 years ago. But to this day, if you go on Showdown HQ, these devices and these vulnerabilities still exist. These companies think this is a great thing. They're securing their network. But they're really not. Just because it is adding security, it doesn't mean that the device itself is secure. I also learned that even a pen tester or an admin, like I was at the time, can find vulnerabilities. So if I can find it, there's got to be more out there. And I also figured out that these devices, these appliances, are the perfect place to hide. Incident handlers don't have credentials to them. They didn't even know that Linux was the back end. So all my tools that I hosted on, they never found. I could do all my command and control through this device, and they had no idea what was going on. So I decided to keep, I started collecting, if you will, appliances. I trolled eBay and Craigslist, and these are all the things that I actually purchased and took a look at. And several of them I found vulnerabilities and reported them. You can also get fully functional demos from the vendor sites. So you can contact McAfee and you can get a full working virtual machine and take a look at that. So as a tester or as an adversary, they can go see what you have, then go to the vendor, pull down a version that's exactly the same as yours. then build all of their tools to work against your clients, and then bring it into your environment, and it'll work. So the virtual appliance marketplace is full. If you're new to pen testing or want to get into it, you can go there and download tons of things and find your own vulnerabilities and just play around. So I also bought a lot of hardware. Most of the people, when they've heard me talk about this, are like, wow, you must have a lot of money. And that's not the case at all. You can actually get nearly new appliances that people don't need, or they never needed in the first place, but they bought them anyway, their boss bought them, and they end up on eBay. Or they used it for a year, the license expired, so it's somewhat good hardware, and you can get it for 50 to 100 bucks. I bought a Google search appliance for $75, so I've got a Google search appliance. So this is what my basement used to look like. She doesn't let me store them under the couch anymore, so I had to get rid of them. That's that bottom picture. Can't really tell. But yeah, I started storing things, these one-use servers, all over the house because the rack filled up. All right, so how did I test a new device? And this is kind of how I recommend it. It's really simple. You want to back up the hard drive. In case you mess anything up, you want to be able to restore it. The first step is always to read the manual. You can basically read the manual and figure out areas that are potentially vulnerable. Look for remote access. Look for how the company is going to administer the box, how it's going to get its updates. In one example, it had a form to fill out if you ever locked yourself out, and they can get you back into it. So I knew that there was some way that that had to work, so that I went looking for that. You definitely want to put it in a lab network, and I got an example as to why you want to do that. You want to isolate it from your actual network. Treat it as bad before you basically prove to yourself that it's good. So think that it's evil and malicious from day one. Basically do an old style pen test against it. Port scan, see what ports are open. Look for known vulnerabilities with the services. If it's got FTP, look to see if there's a known vulnerability with that FTP service. So at least you know what you're putting out there before you do it. Actually log in. Assume that an attacker could log in. We'll talk about that in a second. And see if there are any things that they could do, some feature that comes with it. A lot of proxies have packet capture features. So this is a device that all your traffic, all your web traffic is going through. If someone logs into that, they can do really easy packet captures and get all of your web traffic. Maybe that's not something you want. Look for ways to get root, ways that an attacker would use, and then the features like we just talked about. So we're all friends here, but let's get real for a second. Most people look at their network and think this: the internet, people on the internet hit their firewall and they can't get into the money, right? So the money, the data, they can't get access to it. But it quickly goes to this with a single phishing email. So I kind of burned this. I don't use it anymore, but I used this for years. This is a macro in Excel with a copyright of a product that doesn't exist, saying this is protected with DLP. You should open it, but before you can open it, you got to enable our product. So hit enable content so that you can enable the macro that's evil and going to run the background. So this has hit admins. This has hit people I've seen talk at security conferences. This has been really effective for years. I've since moved on to something else. But a phishing email is going to get them to the inside. So let's assume that. So why would an attacker care about your network device or this appliance that you put on? They want your data, and they want your Windows, your enterprise, but they can do it from the device. A lot of times it's a full Linux OS. It's the preferred operating system that most attackers are coming from. A lot of times they have Python, Lua, Ruby, Bash already installed and already being used. So coding something quick to attack your infrastructure is easy. And I've seen Netcat, full Netcat with the E, Nmap, TCP dump. Any tool that you would ever use on Backtrack, you can port to a lot of these appliances because a lot of them are running Ubuntu. Also, sometimes they're in a privileged network segment. So maybe you have an administrator network and everything is multi-home, and these appliances are going to reside with the private IP in that network. So this could get them in there. We talked about incident responders, incident handlers. They don't have credentials. to these. They don't even look at them like they're actually things that can be compromised. So sometimes to pull the hard drive, like a Google search appliance, for example, you have to drill out rivets to get to the hard drive on the inside. During an incident, is that going to happen? Is the incident handler going to drill out and pull apart the server? Maybe, but probably not. A lot of times the admins don't have admin access. They're not root on them. They're just using the web interface. They plugged it in, they were told it works, so that's all they're using. And in all likelihood, a lot of these are touching the internet, so they're the best place for an attacker to sit. They can be touched from the internet, and they can touch your internal infrastructure. They're not being monitored. It's a great, great place to live. All right, so everyone knows what an appliance is, right? Not a refrigerator. But a lot of what they do is they buy outdated hardware. So they're buying like 3-year-old servers. They're throwing software on it, and then they're selling it, 10,000, 15, 25,000. They spend their budget on going to conferences like RSA, and then they push this out. A lot of times, they didn't pay for any licensing on the OS. It's Linux or Unix variant. They script a couple tools together. They throw it out to do one task that you could probably do yourself, and then they throw a couple-year-old web app on top of that to manage it, and that's what a lot of these appliances are. But people keep buying them. These are actual things I took from marketing from Black Hat this year. These are actual claims by security companies about their product. What's sad is a lot of them are the same company, but so blocks known and unknown attacks. Like everyone in this room knows that these things are wrong, but does your boss? Do the people that make the decisions in your company, that spend the money, they see this and they're like, we need to buy that. So that's what happens. And they sell things like operates without human intervention or updating. You don't have to update our product. You don't have to worry about security. We've got that covered. Just plug it in. All right, so let's go over a couple examples. This is a network monitoring appliance, the Mutiny appliance. As you can see, this is taken from their site yesterday. They're selling a server with a 2.6 dual-core Intel. That's a 6 or 7 year old processor at least. A 250 gig hard drive. Nothing. It's expanded to 2 gigs of RAM. So that's obviously something old, but yet it sells for several $1,000s. So what we can do is scan, like we talked about. Look at the open ports. Just a general. On this box, SSH is open. Well, they don't supply the root password for the actual OS. They give you the web app, which you can see down there, so you can log in. At the very bottom, I reported a vulnerability, and this was their response. It says it fixed some Linux vulnerability issues, but they didn't fix all of them, so this is still vulnerable, even though it's on. This is their actual login when you download it. It says they fixed the issue, but they didn't. HTTP has default passwords you can look up. So a lot of times I get asked, I get in through default passwords. Everybody does, right? Pen testers get in default passwords for the win. How do you find these? You can find them all over the place. I like to go directly to the manual because I'm going to read that anyway. But sometimes the web app right there on the right, the web app itself will tell you, hey, this is what you log in with. Other times, so the manual down there is one, and then there's cert.net. And then I've got a dictionary of general default ones that I try. So you read the manual, you might see a reference to a backdoor account, or hey, admin is this, and then engineer is this. Maybe they change admin, they didn't change engineer, and guest is this. Maybe guest isn't all you need to go and find the information that you want, like a command injection vulnerability. A lot of times these appliances limit your admin password to some ridiculous 8 characters. That's all you can set. This is not one of those. I think it was 12 at the time. So you can easily brute force or try a dictionary against those to get in. So my point behind this is just because you change the password or just because it requires you to log in, these appliances require you to log in, doesn't mean that an attacker won't figure that out or figure out how to get around it. Down here at the bottom, this is Fireforce. It's a Firefox add-on. It's really easy dictionary and brute forcing of web forms. So you install that, and that's how easy it is. You put the username, you right-click, go down to Fireforce, load dictionary, give it a text file, and it'll go through it'll ask, hey, what is the difference between a good login and a bad login? So when it tells you wrong password, you put that in as a bad login, and then it uses that for all the returns. It's a really easy tool to use. All right, so we figured out the password, right? What do we do with that now?
Sorry, real quick with that last page. How often are they monitoring failed logins on things like that?
That's a good question. A lot of these aren't reporting, so these appliances aren't reporting anywhere. In this case, there are no logs within the web app. You would have to actually log in. They don't give you root access, so you would have no way of knowing that someone is trying to brute force into this appliance. But some of the higher end appliances absolutely, and put it like
Like an SNMP trap or something like that?
you could set that up. Or like Symantec and McAfee have moved to bad logins being right there when you log in. Bam! You know, as soon as the admin logs in, as long as they are logging in, they'll see, hey, someone tried to log in 18 million times. You know, that's bad. But that's a problem with a lot of appliances. They don't fit into the normal log review. And who reviews logs, honestly? Right, we should, but it's very rare. I don't see that very often. Okay, so I'm not some super elite reverse engineer exploit writer, so I tend to stick with things that are really easy. I was a Windows admin, and I became a pen tester, and now I'm a security researcher, which really comes down to this. I find things that are obviously going to be vulnerable, and then I just do it. In this case, I tend to start with troubleshooting utilities, things that do trace route, ping, anything that I can put something in that it's going to interpret on the back end. It's probably just passing this to ping some sort of way. So why don't I append another command? So I'm appending, in this case, it's actually setting the IP is one of the vulnerabilities. There are other ones in this appliance. But in the subnet mask, so this is, what command is this running?
Just ping.
ifconfig, right? It's setting the IP. So I'm just appending to the end of ifconfig, ping myself. If it does it, because it's blind. If it doesn't, then I know, hey, this thing is vulnerable to this. I can potentially run other commands. The third note's pretty important. I don't really get into it, but a lot of embedded devices have read-only file systems. So you're not going to be able to change the root password. You're not going to be able to write something to the disk to stay there. So how are you going to maintain persistence on these, small, compressed Linux distros? If you can find a command injection that's being monitored or written to a config file somewhere,
Create
then
a
you can.
cron job?
What's that?
Create a cron job? To the
Well,
to the
right.
SQL?
You could if they're maintaining that on reboot, and a lot of them
That's
aren't. So a lot of times it's the whole file system in one file and a config in another file. By writing to the config, by adding a command injection, when it reboots, it's going to do whatever you tell it to do. So if that's pull down a bash file and run it, then that's a really easy way to maintain persistence. All right, so we found the vulnerability. That was really easy. So how do we use it? You could use curl. In this case, wget is not on the box, so trial and error. Curl is there, so you can pull it down and then execute it. So pull it down, change permissions on it so that you can execute it, drop it in temp, and execute. And then, what should a web app be running as?
Single user? No
Anything but. A lot of times you see that. This appliance, full appliance with a full Linux distro, is running the web application as root, which is just a terrible, terrible practice that they continue to do in the current version. You could also add a user if you wanted to do that, and then SSH in, since we talked about SSH was there. So all that's cool, and I was going to release this really bad Python script to automate this. And last week, Juan Vasquez from Rapid7 just decided, I guess it got into his work queue because he never talked to me, just decided he would write an exploit module to do this for this appliance. So there it is, it's already out there. You can grab it and use it, and it works. I was going to do a demo, but it's literally as easy as putting the IP and then you have a root shell. So it wasn't really a spectacular thing to look at. But so that's the Mutiny subnet mask exec. If you run into this and they say patched it, you might want to look at every other field within the appliance. It's probably still vulnerable. Okay, so that was a network monitoring appliance. They don't know anything about security, right? They're just, they're network guys. So let's look at a security appliance. And this is the Cososis Endpoint Protector 4. Protect your network from the threats posed by portable storage devices. So this is like a BYOD type appliance. Solve this problem for you thing. And they even, I guess it doubles as some sort of physical security mechanism. If a ninja hacker gets into your server room, you can fight them off with this appliance. That's their actual advertising. This is straight from their website. This is how they're marketing this product. All right, so let's scan it, and let's look at what it's got. Right off the bat, it's got an old version of FTP that there's a Metasploit module for. So right off the bat, if you deploy this appliance today, you bought it, spent the thousands and thousands of dollars and threw it out there, it comes with a remotely exploitable FTP running. So the problem with it is it's really rare. It's a really difficult exploit that takes a long time, like several days. So I wanted to get in a different way. So I looked at the web interface, I scanned everything. SSH is enabled, but again, no provided password. So I'm like, I'm gonna try something different this time. I'm gonna email them as the customer, because I saw this actually on a pen test. I'm gonna email them and say, hey, can I have the password? It's mine. Right? Can I be root on my own thing? Is that cool? And this was their response. No. To protect their product. Thanks for your understanding. Okay, so they remotely manage this device somehow, according to their manual. So I had to figure out how they were setting the password. Is it unique? Is it the same password? Because if it's the same password, that's a vulnerability. If I can crack that password, I can get on any of them. So I started digging into the code. It turns out this entire thing is written in Bash. The entire, everything web app, the entire product.
Is that Eric's company?
So what you're looking at here is this is the actual activation script. So if you download the demo and you go look for this vulnerability, it's not going to exist because they don't run the activation script until you activate the product. But when you activate the product, it's going to take the serial number of the valid activation, which gets provided in this process of going back and forth. It's going to take all the numbers in the serial number. It's going to add them up. So that's ID file is what it's catting. It's cutting out the serial number. And then it's adding it to the sums. So right there. So this string, the number, add it all up, and RO at the end. So that's what it's doing, right? So it's unique-ish for each. So what does it actually mean? There are 91 possible passwords. Because it's taking the serial number and adding them all together. So again, I like PowerShell. So that's it in PowerShell to generate all these passwords. So you can take your favorite SSH brute forcing tool, give it this dictionary, and you're guaranteed to log in. As an account, the account is EPP root, so it's not the actual root password. But once you log in as EPP root, and I made this before public disclosure, it's in sudo, so you can just sudo to root, and you're good to go.
Fail.
All right. So the other security. These are the things that really scare me. Because these things you wouldn't think to look at. And your security department, your physical security guys, are very likely going to have their cameras connected to your network. Which is good, and you want to protect that, and they need access to it. But recently, there have been several disclosures of products, and along the same time, I was looking at one. I actually bought it off a loop. I was like, wow, this is a great deal. And it's a similar product. I have not reached anyone at the vendor who would listen to me, so I'm not going to mention the specific vendor's name, but I am going to show you everything in its entirety to answer any of your questions. But it is from their own advertising, it is the largest U.S. provider of security cameras. So let's go through the process again. Let's isolate it from our network. Let's scan it. So look at those open ports. Anything jump out at you?
Yeah.
So telnet, obviously that's, anything else? Do you know what some of those are? I mean, Nmap doesn't. So that's interesting, right? The fact that it's got strange ports open. But like you said, 80, telnet, good stuff. So let's telnet in, right? That's remote access. This is the one that had the form that said if you get locked out, this is one of, that had the same thing. If you get locked out, you know, we'll get you back in. You just have to go see it. You have to take one step up. You got to go to a notary and have them notarize this form and send it to them. And then they will mail you how to, the instructions to get back into this. So I assume they're going to mail you the password, right? I think I figured out differently. But so telnet, we don't have the password. I tried some passwords. It didn't work. So go through those ports. I actually started with port 9527. So for those that can't see, or maybe don't understand the ramifications of that, connecting to a port with no authentication, you can execute commands. So I got nothing back, right? So I connected and just sat there. So I tried LS.
It works.
And it works. And then I was like, let me cat Etsy password, which is cool. But then I noticed that there was only one user in there, and it had the hash, so there's no shadow file. There's only one user. I'm running as him. So I have root without any authentication remotely. So that's not good, or legit, depending on. So do I have everyone's agreement? I haven't talked to too many people about this. That's a backdoor, right? That's their way of remote management. A side note, I actually tore this thing apart. And I went like big time reverse engineer off the bat. Like I'm gonna find. I actually soldered header pins on there. I'm gonna find serial because it didn't have a serial port, and I couldn't figure it all out. I called people. I literally soldered a header pin on every single open hole in the motherboard and could not figure it out. All before doing this. So note to self: start easy, then move up.
Did you ever crack that dev password?
I did not. I didn't try that.
Why would you?
Just to see if it's the same across
Can't
other.
break to it.
Yeah.
But I guess if you can connect, like you said.
Yep. Okay, so that's scary, right? What's even scarier is that's not even the worst part. So, always monitor, isolate these things, and look at them. So I was monitoring, and I had T-Sharp running. I was like, wow, it's making these connections to these foreign IPs. Like right after it boots up, it waits a while, connects to one, comes down, connects to another one. So it's connecting to 221, 230, 140, 160, 162, 165. So I did follow stream. You see what's in there?
Yep.
So if you change the web application's username and password, it's shipping it to this IP in plain text. So that was my actual username and password that I changed it to. Going across the wire to this foreign IP, which is, in my mind, not associated with the company that's branding is on this device.
It's owned by China Telco.
Actually,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I did a who is
One-
on
yeah,
the
one-
before you put
one
the
slide ahead of me.
Sorry.
So,
you really good job.
They're even fucking talk killer.
so my passwords are being shipped to a Chinese IP address.
Awesome.
And this is a security measure.
Well,
It's in XML.
security.
It's security-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in XML, right? That's
Is that the ABT1 address?
yeah. Where's maybe it? So unfortunately, it's not as cool as I originally thought. APT, but it's actually a feature. There's a remote access website running on one of those IPs. So I immediately jumped to the APT. Oh man, China! But it turns out the motherboard manufacturer had this feature that this U.S. company who bought the motherboard didn't realize that it came with. So you can remote access the actual cameras over the web through this website, and it's not documented anywhere. But you could also do it by device. If you drop that down, it gives you a username and password, and it's actually checking your username and password from your device that you set. So you don't set this up there, it's actually pulling it from your device. You have to register first and associate your device with your password.
So it's safe.
It's safe. It's really safe. It's so safe that if you have the name O'Toole with a single tick in it,
It blows up.
you get a, can you read that? You have an error in your SQL syntax, so I'm sure that the company that's doing a great job filtering out,
Tomcat 5, dude.
yeah, Tomcat 5 is awesome. If I were gonna build a lab for you guys to hack into, I might start with Tomcat 5. But that's as far as I went on that. But I thought it was pretty scary. All right, so those are my 3 examples. So now what would an attacker do? So as you wrap your head around, they can get into these things. They could actually attack your enterprise from here. They could upload Linux utilities like the pass the hash suite and go after your actual enterprise. They could attack your admins when they log in. If it's a proxy appliance or anything that's actually has traffic going through it, they can go at it that way. They can capture credentials. All that stuff should be pretty obvious. This is an attack I pulled off a couple times. It's a lot of fun for the pen testers. You can find XSS vulnerabilities, or you could use XSS features, branding. So you go put in whatever JavaScript you want to rebrand this appliance so that it shows up on the web page, the initial logon page, as your company. So you can put whatever HTML you want in there. So we can put, a beef hook or whatever the latest IE exploit is directly in their own appliance. As soon as the admin hits it, he's hit. The access denied page, if it's a proxy, every single user who goes to a web page they're not supposed to go to would then be hit with your beef hook. So you can just sit back and hook everybody's browser who goes to bad websites. Okay, so I've got a ton of recommendations. These last few slides are wordy on purpose. I'll post these up on my blog, obscuresec.com, so you can go through it and look at it. Really what I'm preaching here, and I shouldn't be preaching, what we're talking about is you've got to convince your boss that you need to really look at these devices before you deploy them. Anything that says it can stop unknown attacks with 100% accuracy, you almost don't even want to look at it at that point, because I can almost guarantee that it's going to have problems. So look for vulnerabilities, make sure that they've been disclosed. You don't want a company that's never had a vulnerability disclosed. From a security researcher standpoint, most of the time it's because they take so long to respond or are stonewalling for so long that we just give up. So there are tons of vulnerabilities that I've disclosed that have never become public because the companies just sit on it or are so hard to reach, like the third example, that there's nothing I can do but submit to cons and talk about it then. So look at what you have now. Does anybody want to go back and start scanning their stuff on their network right now?
Not my stuff.
All right, segment them from your enterprise. Keep them away from everything else. Even if you find vulnerabilities, it's not the end of the world. Contact the vendor, have them fix it. But keep them from being able to be used against the rest. Put them in their own VLAN and monitor them.
Do you find most of them are in a management VLAN though?
I find a lot of times they do have like a dual setup. So there's a 10 dot network that they use for administration. The problem with that is they're probably not monitoring the 10 dots. So you get into one, and then you attack all the other private IP space, and their IDS is sitting on their normal network, not seeing any of it. So in the end, they don't see anything. All the attacks happened over this unmonitored network. So to some extent, that's good. You keep all your administration traffic on this other network, and then on the other hand, the attackers can use whatever the admin's using. Read security blogs. If the vendor won't give you root, don't buy it. How are you going to see if you're owned? Or if you are owned, what are you going to call the vendor and they're going to come in and look at it? Ask them how they store their passwords, they'll probably lie, but all you can do is don't buy their products. It's really the only leverage that we have. And the last thing, I had all these servers, so I had to figure out, what to do with them, all these one-use servers. So the best thing, I did a couple different things, but the best thing that I've done so far is take a couple-year-old appliance I got for 25, 30 bucks off of eBay and put Security Onion. Anybody familiar with Security Onion? It's a complete IDS on a live CD, easy installation, works great out of the box, and then bam, I have a useful appliance with open source software that's updating that I have root access to, that multiple people are contributing to, and I've saved a ton of money, and I'm probably just getting what I need and not giving an attacker a place to hide. So that's all I got. I'm ObscureSec on Twitter. A special thanks to all the people that helped me out, and the fellow speakers and all the B-Sides Puerto Rico. It's a great conference. Thanks for coming to the talk. Anybody have questions? Nope. Thanks.